Hello and welcome to the webinar on why APIs are not enough. This webinar is being conducted by Red Hat, a multinational software company, and hosted by Bank Innovation. This is Tatiana Kulkarni. I'm the Deputy Editor at Bank Innovation. We're a leading industry blog on financial technology and digital banking. We encourage all of you to ask questions during this webinar. For that, you can send us your questions through the little chat box that says Q&A below on your screen. And with that, I would like to introduce our speakers. Eric Marks, he's the Financial Services Product Manager at Red Hat. Prior to joining Red Hat, Eric shaped solutions within retail and wealth management at HSBC Bank. He has more than 20 years of experience in the field. He will be joined by Edson Yanega, who's the Director of Developer Experience at Red Hat. Edson is a Java champion, a published author, and an expert on microservices, cloud computing, and software craftsmanship. Welcome to you both, and welcome again to all our listeners. I turn the floor over to you, Eric and Edson.
Thank you, Tatiana. If you wouldn't mind flipping to the next slide, and I'll speak to this. So first of all, I'm really excited about talking about this. And no, I'm not going to give you another pitch on how technology platforms are going to solve all the world's ills or transform an industry. I know there's been a lot of talk about open banking and the promise of open banking, but much of it is centered around the power of APIs, either as a provider or as a consumer. And unfortunately, a lot of it is driven by the technical conversation. Now, platforms are important. They will be used for agility, for speed, time to market. And we do believe that things like containers, connectivity, automation, and management are critical ingredients for being successful in open banking. But the technology platform itself is not enough. And Edson is going to be talking at length about how developer communities are really going to shape the future of these new banking platforms that are being built. Please flip to the next slide.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric, and thank you everybody that is watching us. As Eric was mentioned, like all of this platform conversation, they are just tools to allow people, especially developers, to create another layer on top of that. And when we're talking about the application layer, when we're trying to expose some services to other people, we are talking about APIs. That's why I'm so excited to be talking with you today. I consider myself a very hardcore developer, even though I've been enabling developer communities worldwide in the past 5 years. So we're going to try to share a bit of this experience from engaging developers and trying to make them successful with the tools that we're providing with you today. And I'd like to give you this first quote, with no matter how big your company is or how talented are your engineers, it doesn't matter if you're Google, if you're Amazon, or if you're Apple, or any other big software company, innovation from the community is always bigger. So if you think that your company, you might have 10,000, 400,000, 1 million talented developers, I can guarantee you that if you go and count outside your company, you're going to find much more talented and experienced and inspired developers. It's not just about technical knowledge. When we're talking about innovation, of course you can innovate inside your company. In fact, it's mandatory that you innovate inside your company. But if you're doing that alone, I guess your chances are reduced when compared if you were enabled by this millions of other developers that are working outside your other organization. So it's not just about technical engineer, it's about also diversity of thought. Because when you have people that are working together on every single day, they tend to agree on the same common set of ideas. And it becomes even harder and harder to innovate when everybody's thinking the same every single day. So one of the advantages of engaging a community outside your own organization, as you have this diversity of thoughts, you have people from many different countries, many different backgrounds, and eventually they might find other people with other different backgrounds, and they will come with a solution, or a new solution, or the same solution with a different approach to a same problem. And that's how innovation happens. So I like to consider that innovation happens when people with different ideas, different background skills, different motivations, they just happen to find each other somewhere, somehow, and they just join forces to create something that is new, and most important, of course, useful to help other people. So that's what I like to call about community inside and outside innovation. And next slide, please. But of course, when we're talking about community of developers, community of users, you as a company, you shouldn't expect them to come to you, because these developers are widespread. And of course, you might assume that developers these days, thanks to all of this amount of information and different ways to access information, they are engaging in many different ways and many different focal points. So don't expect to have a very great marketing idea or a marketing budget. You just spend on some advertisement, and then developers will automatically start using your tools and your APIs to the benefit of your company. That doesn't happen. First, because competition is very hard. And second, once you have many different options to do the same things, or supposedly the very same things, developers will use the tools that they're most familiar with, or the tools that somebody they know, or that eventually seen a video by a trusted third party that not usually the company selling that produce it, or they will go to a forum, or they will go to their local meetup and see somebody presenting about the tool because, oh, I had this problem today and I Googled a bit, I found this solution, and I decided to apply that in my project, and it worked. So that's a good reference, right? It worked for somebody else, maybe it can work for me. So making developers aware of what you're doing and making them know how great your tools and your APIs are, it's a challenge. And it's nice that we as Red Hat, we've been building this developer community in the past 25 years. And to be very honest with you, developers that are hearing us right now might just recognize that open source developers, open source Linux developers might be some of the hardest to, well, they might not have the greatest soft skill sets. They are very good technical people, but when talking about soft skills, they're not that talented. So yes, we know how to build communities based on open source, even when talking with people that have a hard time in trying to communicate and engage with other people. And some of these lessons I'll be able to share with you on the remaining of this presentation. So I have here 4 big points. When we're talking about how can you reach developers and how can you make them aware of what you're doing or what APIs are you providing to them. First, you have conferences. And I separate that conferences in 2 different types. You have conferences, they are basically provided by vendors. So you have vendor conferences. So if you go to a big conference, it's AWS, it's a Red Hat, it's a Microsoft or something else conference. Developers that go there, they certainly think, well, these people are trying to sell me something. It's a vendor conference, that's their expectation. They want to generate leads and everything else. So they, of course, everything they present there might be biased. So, and the second type of conferences are community conferences. Again, community is a very important thing. When you talk about community conference, we're talking about conferences that are organized by independent people, independent user groups, people from the community that don't work for these big companies. And when they try to select some content for these conferences, they simply try to select the content that will be more useful to the developer community. So if you're able, for example, to show some of your APIs and your tools on a developer conference, it will be much more valuable presenting the same thing on a vendor conference. So you must be able to reach developers on these community conferences. And what type of developers can you expect on these community conferences? For sure, most of these are the 9-to-5 developers that are just accommodated. They don't want to learn something else. They just want to keep doing the same things. These developers usually won't be on this developer conference, but the leaders, the thought leaders of the companies are the ones attending these community conferences. So that's the kind of people that you need to engage. So you go there to present great technical content. And if you present that well enough, if your tools or APIs are good enough, you can expect some love to be shared by these leads from these thought leaders. Okay. Another way for you to engage the developer community, and I guess that this one is particularly tricky because it's not like developers just chasing some prizes. You might have some developer contests to make them to try to foster innovation between the developer community. But I guess the most desired prize by these thought leaders is just a title that recognizes how powerful or how knowledgeable or how smart these people are. So you have a trade-off. You can't give these kinds of awards to everybody. But if you have too few of them, then you don't have enough thought leadership on the space. So yeah, I would say this kind of reward is tricky, and you need to be very careful about that, because basically you're trying to recognize who are the admired people in the community. So when you see, oh, that person uses this API, this guy uses, this guy or girl uses the APIs from that company to solve this kinds of problem, and this person is recognized as a great developer. So that's how you associate your APIs, your company with this particular type of developer. But again, it's tricky. Many companies have failed in the past, try to give giving awards to developers. So I strongly suggest you to have some care. Another point is that when you have conferences, community conference, there are of course a few of them in the world. You expect the thought leaders of these companies to go to this conference. And the other side is that you also have community meetups. And these community meetups, they happen on the cities. And sometimes even inside the company where these developers work for. So it's one thing to expect your developers to come to a conference, you get the thought leaders. But if you go to a meetup, maybe you can get a much wider audience, because people that wouldn't have the time and money to go to this community conference, maybe in another city, they are allowed to go to these community meetups. They are allowed to spend like 2 hours of their day on a Wednesday, get some beer, get some pizza, and learn some content. And again, community meetups are organized by community leaders. So you need to learn who are these leaders. And sometimes even if you don't have a meetup, but if you think that a certain city is strategic to your company, you might want to find a thought leader on that city and try to ask, like, sponsor him or he or she to create this community meetup. So, but again, another word of advice: don't force them to promote your products. Just do that for the goodness of, for the greatness of their community, and I'm pretty sure that eventually they will come back to you, because you will have good things to share, and they want to know what you have to share too. And the latest one, forums, of course. Personally, you have a much better result. If you go to a community conference or a community meetup, you get a much better result on engagement, but it doesn't scale that much. So you have online forums. If you can create an online forum for your own company. That's one approach. But again, if you create your own online forum, you're expecting people to come to you. If you just can identify on the existing forums on the internet, where are the developers that you need? Who is going to be enabled by the tools that you're developing? And if you go there, and if you get like your developer advocates and developer evangelists to to engage with these people where they already are on these electronic forums, you might get some return of your investment. So these are the 4 points, but basically I want to say that don't expect people to come to you. You have to go where developers are, and these days, 2018, soon to be 2019, developers are located there. So just remember that, as usual, developers are people. And if you try to think as a developer, you know what they desire. If you, in your role, you don't know what is to be a developer, I'm pretty sure that you have developers inside your company, and these developers, they have thoughts and feelings to share with you. So you already have the most valuable people inside your company where you can get some ideas. Just go and talk to them. Maybe buy lunch, right? I like food too, so you can buy some lunch and talk to these people. Next line. And I can't emphasize this enough. Listen to the community is more important than talking. You are not going to where developers are just trying to pitch your thing, saying, oh, my API is better than the other ones. The tools that I provide to you are better than the others. Now, oh, if you just use my tools, you'll be able to do this, this, and that because that's what I want you to do. Well, first, that's not how it works, and second, you want developers. They have too many options today to consume, right? Unless you're the first in your space, which usually doesn't happen when you're a bank, for example. You have like many different banks and many different financial companies offering similar services. So if you have similar services being provided, you have to make sure that your API is the greatest. And how do you do that? Listening, gathering feedback, and that's why I think that people that work as developer advocates and the developer evangelists are so important if you want to engage in the developer community, because these people are experienced developers and they are there to see how developers are struggling or how well they are performing with your APIs. So one very simple example of how can you engage with the community and make your API better is that, from my experience, it's very hard for you when you're developing a public API to know the right level of granularity of your methods, of your APIs. Because if that's too coarse, you're basically saying your APIs, each one of your methods in your API are doing too much. So you're just limiting innovation because there are very few pre-built use cases that can be empowered by your API. But on the other hand, it's usually easier to teach people because you offer them a complete use case. The opposite side, if you have a too fine-grained API, you give a lot of power to the developers, but then it requires a lot of work to get anything done with your API. And if it's hard, then you need more documentation. People need more resource and more time to be able to consume your API, but they also have more power. So experienced developers prefer fine-grained APIs because it gives them more power. But then you need to know the business model. You need to know how the API works. Beginner developers want coarse-grained APIs because it's easier for them to start, but it limits what you can achieve in the long term. So you see, these are two opposite sides of the same thing. You want to expose a public API, and the only way for you to reach the right level of abstraction in your API is by going to the developer community and getting feedback. You make them try to use their API, you collect their feedback, you have people answering emails, answering on forums, going to the meetup, to the developer conferences and talking to people and getting this feedback and providing this feedback inside your company, talking to the product managers. How can we change this API because I have this use case, this complaint. People are just like having too many steps to be able to do this particular use case. How can we make their life easier? Or our current API has a limitation, is that it doesn't allow advanced users to do that. So how can we change? How can we provide them this information that they need to do that? So that's how you get feedback. So listen to the community is much more important than talking. And I have to to say a word about the hackathons here, because I've seen many senior management people saying, "Oh, if you want, we want developers to use our stuff. Just make a hackathon, buy pizza, beer, and they'll just spend like the weekend 40 hours. They will innovate with our thing, and then we'll have like very nice solutions on Monday." Well, that's not how it works. First, you can't, as any developer knows, you don't expect anything great to happen if you work like 48 hours straight on a weekend, especially if you have like too much beer and pizza involved. And with people that you never worked before, maybe you're not even that comfortable. And some senior management think that, oh, we just have to give them like a PS4 Pro or X1 X as a prize, or a very nice trip to San Francisco, and they'll do that for free for us. Well, I know that some people have this misconception. That's not what hackathons were for. Hackathons are a tool for making people to know you. So you're there to empower people. So the goal of a hackathon is not to have a winner. The goal of a hackathon is to have the largest possible amount of people that know your APIs and know your tools. So after they know what are you capable to offer to them, then innovation will come. Then whenever they reach like a different problem or a different new business use case, they say, oh, that company provides that API that solves this problem. And it's very easy to do. Hopefully it's very easy to do, because I joined a hackathon like 2 months ago, and I hacked something, and it's worked. Like it's worked. Maybe it might be the magical result here. It worked at the time. It's probably going to work right now. So it's very important for you that in hackathon, you don't want to have a winner. You want all of them to be winners, because everybody that engage in your hackathon will be empowered, will have the knowledge that whenever they reach this particular problem or this particular use case, they will know how to solve that using your API. Okay, so next slide. So being part of a community means you're there for developer enablement and empowerment. So I just mentioned the hackathon scenario. You're there to help people. You're not there to sell people your stuff, to say people how your API is great. No, it's never about you or your company or your API or your service. It's all about them. Think about when you're trying to buy something, when you try to consume something. Even if you're trying to buy a car or buy something else, are you really trying to buy a product or a service, or are you trying to buy a better version of yourself? Like when you go to shop like a shirt or a dress, are you going there to buy just the clothes, or are you trying to buy something that makes you better? So that's the approach. When we're talking about developer enablement and empowerment, we're not talking about our companies, our APIs, our services. We're talking about how we make these developers even more awesome, how we make them even more great, so they can be their best at the thing that they do, coding, and using your APIs, they will be able to solve a larger variety of problems. They will be able to innovate, and your API in this case can solve the same problem, but in an easier way, in a faster way, in a cheaper way. That's one sort of innovation. Or your API can provide an entire new capability to these developers. That's up to you to choose. But you just decide, how do you want to enable these developers? That's how you're going to have traction. That's how you're going to have an audience. And again, it's an exponential thing. If you do wrong things, you get an exponential result going down. If you go great things, you get an exponential result going up, because these developers, people, they are very eager to complain about everything. And it's not that usual for people to say good things about the things that you sell or that you provide. But if the right people in the community, again, if the thought leaders are enabled by what you're doing, you can be sure that these people will be sharing articles, blogs, videos, talks in conferences and meetups, and then you get the exponential benefit from all the things that you're doing back to you. Next slide, please. So developers are the true heroes of innovation through APIs. If you ever read or heard about developers or the new kingmakers, you know that the idea is that in the past, when we didn't have all of this information available for us to consume, developers had to use the tools that the company provided for them. So, oh, you're going to develop this stack because that's the one that we bought. But now that we have open source, now that we have the internet, and all of these resources are very easily available for developers to consume, basically developers choose what they're working with. So it can't be a top-down approach. You're not going to talk to the CTO of the startup of the other company, say, oh, I'm going to sell you my APIs. No, because even if you do that, maybe developers are using APIs from another provider just because, oh, it's easier, or I already know how to do that using the other API. So developers true hero, and innovation and consumption of these APIs, these days it happens bottom up instead of top down. The only opportunities where I've seen decisions like top down from API consumption, especially if you have a very competitive market, is that, oh, these APIs, they do the same. And unfortunately, if you have like two APIs that do the same from different providers, then the discussions start to reach the level of costs. And you, as a company, you don't want to be compared as the Me Too. Oh, I'm the Me Too company. I'm doing the Me Too thing that the other company already did like 2 years ago. So you're basically competing against price. You don't want to do that. You want to really provide innovation for developers to be doing that. And how, since we're talking, we mentioned open source. API is the thing that your company is exposing to the public. The easiest you get developers to consume your APIs, the more users of your APIs you have. So it's there's another thing called, when I said tools, you have something called toolkits or libraries. That's the thing that you're going to provide to your developers so they can easily consume your API. And when we're talking about toolkits and libraries, usually they are specific to a certain framework or language or platform. So you need to do your research. Your developer advocacy team needs to do their own research, meaning that they need to know, oh, we're providing this type of API, which is the mostly likely type of developer that is going to consume our services, and start focusing on these key platforms. Maybe Android developers are going to consume API, maybe iOS, maybe Java, maybe Ruby, maybe Python, maybe in .NET. You need to identify these key developer types, and then provide these toolkits and libraries for them to be easily consuming, because consuming this API should be a process. Oh, they just need to type like 5 words on a command line, and they'll be already ready to consume. Because if it takes longer than that, well, they already have to know you. They already have to learn about what you're doing. They will already need to read the docs, which people rarely do. If they need to do more than that, if they need to install, or if they need to program to be able to too much to be able to consume your services, again, that's not going to happen. Okay, so be aware of that. Next slide, please. And if you did everything right, how can you nurture this community that you're just about to create? And again, we from Red Hat, we have this expertise of 25 years nurturing these developer communities, and I am one of these developers that was raised from the open source community. I used to be, I like to think that I'm good at my hard skills, but I was very bad at my soft skills, but I was able to practice a bit of them in the past like 10 years. So it enabled me to know what these developers are eager for, and maybe enabled me to talk to them. So and it also enables me to talk a bit about culture, or how the community culture. And there are many different definitions of what is culture. The one that I like the most is that culture is what you do. People say that, oh, psychological things, social interactions, and blah, blah, norms. No. Culture is what you do. You are what you repeatedly do. So culture is basically what you do and how you do it. So if we're trying to create our own open community, the key things about the culture that we need to know is that first, the way that you work with other people needs to be collaborative. You are there to people inside your community. You need to foster collaboration and not competition. Remember, when you compete, you're basically just trying to create enemies, and that's not how you create a great community. You are there to collaborate, because the most successful communities that I've ever seen in my life are the ones that are there to help. I'm here there primarily to help, and eventually to be helped. So that's the things, that's the behavior that you need to grow in the developer community. Second, people need to be accountable for their mistakes. They shouldn't be like ashamed of saying that, oh, I made these mistakes. In fact, I can say something for me. I used to be one of those developers that was very ashamed of every single mistake that I did in the past, because I know, I thought that if I said the mistakes that I made in the past, people wouldn't recognize me as a good developer. And I learned that, well, I made these mistakes, I learned from them. Today I'm a better developer because I know how to avoid them, and I'm empowered to make new mistakes. I can even make fun of this today, and that's the behavior that you need to endorse also in your community. Being transparent, no hiding of information. The more information people have access to, they'll be able to have new ideas. Being transparent also means not having second thoughts when talking between the community members and to the community members. That's another way of being transparent. And meritocratic. Best ideas should win, no matter who had the idea. You had, like, I'm pretty sure you've seen like many great ideas being killed in their birth just because it wasn't the right people to have it. So if you want to have a true enabled community, the culture must be, well, it doesn't matter who is having the idea, you want them to prevail. And just to mention a quick thing about meritocracy and the development community, there are some researchers that even say that when these developers choose their nicknames in online forums, for example, if the nickname doesn't suggest if it's a man or a woman, usually the ideas or the comments that they have on a forum or mail list are much more likely to succeed. Or if you don't have like any religion, sex, gender, and this kind of identification on their nicknames, the more you have it, the more meritocratic is your community, because then you truly allow the best people, best developers to win. Okay, and next slide, please.
Oh, thanks, Edson. I'll take this one. I first of all, I hope you've enjoyed Edson's talk, because I think really at the end of the day, there's been so much talk about who's going to win in this new generation of new banking platforms and systems in the digital economy. And truly, the developer communities, I think, are what are going to set apart the winners and the losers in this new world. I know that may seem odd for banks to be competing for developer mindshare, but it's truly the place where innovation is happening. and the ease of consumption of your technology is truly going to be a difference maker. I wanted to share this slide because there is a true revenue impact of this. And I think, and when I bring this up to colleagues and customers, I think they're surprised that companies like Salesforce derive 43% of the revenue through APIs. They think of their business model as slightly different than an API business model, but truly, almost half of their business is derived through APIs on Force.com. Expedia and their affiliate network is 90% of their revenue is generated through APIs. Effectively, it's an API business. And then eBay, of course, at 60%. The one thing that I would want to add is, we hear about PayPal and then we hear about Stripe as two good examples of API platforms. And you have to ask yourself, why do people like Stripe? Why was there such an uptake on the Stripe as a payment provider platform? And some of it has to do with how they've nurtured their developer community. And as Edson mentioned, it takes effort. You need to reach out to developers very proactively. You can't be condescending. You have to be authentic. And these are the things that are important to build out communities. So with that, I'm going to conclude my part of the presentation and open it up for any questions that might be in the forum.
Awesome. Eric, I just saw a question on the QA. So, well, if you have any other questions, please feel free to, you have a Q&A button where you're able to ask question to us. So we can answer to you while we're here. But while you type your own question in the Q&A, I'd like to say that an anonymous attendee is asking, what specific incentives do you suggest companies use to encourage many participants in a hackathon? Well, participating, you have two different points. How can you even more eager to participate in your hackathon? Again, it's really up to your developer advocate to know which community are you targeting. So do you know what is important for them? One of the things that I realized, if you have like younger developer communities, they are much more crowd-based and they want like some vanity things to be participating. So it might be just as silly as, oh, that company is very cool, or that API, that tool is very cool. I want a t-shirt, or I want a backpack. Or if you want to give a winner, like, oh, let's say the winners of the hackathon are going to earn a Nintendo Wii, which many developers consider more cool than an more expensive video game. That's one of the things that you should be doing. But for more experienced developers, maybe you have other things of culture. Maybe donating to a nonprofit organization is more important for them. So it really depends on your developer advocates to know what are the most desired prizes. I just have to give you a small example. We were in one of the events that Red Hat sponsored. There was this let's say a competition, but we're trying to engage the community. And some sponsors were providing some gifts to make the audience, the attendees, to participate on the contest. And what happened that one of the sponsors, the diamond sponsor of the event, was giving them a very expensive gift, like, I don't know, something that would cost like almost $1,000. And of course, people were excited, but it was like one prize for everything. And I had the idea, well, I know what these people want. So what I thought, we went to the store and we bought, it was just the year of the Star Force Awakens movie, the Force Awakens movie. And we just bought Lego Millennium Falcon. And it was the second prize, the second winner prize. And what happened at the event? Nobody wanted to be the first. Everybody wanted to be the second because they wanted the Millennium Falcon. So that's how you generate excitement, but you need to know the developer community. I knew that the developers there were most people from my generation. There were people that grew Star Wars. And with the movie, they all wanted to have a souvenir. So we had like a branded box of a Lego Millennium Falcon, and that's the thing that everybody was eager. Oh, I just want to participate in this because of that. That has emotional attachments. It's not monetary attachment. And maybe that's one of the things that you can explore, but you really need to know your community. And again, you need to ask your developer advocates or the developers inside your organization.
Thanks, Edson. I see another question coming in about the role of regulations with APIs. So on one hand, you have initiatives like Open Banking driven by PSD2 in the EU, but then you also have GDPR in the EU as well. And that's a great question. And I think there are, as you're noticing, there are goals for people to be empowered with their own information. I mean, if you were to take a Venn diagram of openness and then also control, at the end of the day, the governments are trying to say you're in control of your data, and people want to be in control of their personal information. GDPR essentially says that your information is yours to own. It's not owned by a company, and spells out what that means. And open banking really is driven by meaning that you can have access to it. So it's GDPR is more about who can see what and how that's used, and open banking is about giving you access so you can share it with other organizations you consent to share it with.
Nice. I've seen another question here on the Q&A. Rabia was asking, do companies prefer partnering with individual developers and building the community or with startups? Well, usually all of the answers start with it depends, but I'd just like to emphasize one thing. You can't build a community. You just enable them to grow. So you're not going to, you recruit individual developers or a startup and just build a community. No, again, you go to an already small existing community, or you just identify who are the key thought leaders, the key developers that are recognized as thought leaders on some space, and you talk and you empower them, you enable them, you give tools, resources, you ask them what would be useful for them to be empowered by your APIs. You have this conversation, and maybe then after you have this conversation, after you have this engagement, then you can help them, like sponsoring some meetings, giving them some swag, even if they organize something. Oh, let's get a hacker. And sometimes you can do don't need to be something technological. You can just say, oh, let's just help this non-profit. Let's just gather some people, and we know that if you go help, this bank is gonna give us some money to buy some stuff for this nonprofit. That's one way for you to enable this community to grow. As again, you don't build the community, you just enable them to grow. And communities are created by people. Communities are people. It's not something that you just put money and it automatically grows. Not something that you get your marketing team to, just go and build a community. That's not how it works. You just go to people because these are the people that are making the stuff happens. Some companies in the past, I think can't mention names, but they learned the hard way that these are the people that build the communities, and no matter how much money you have to outpower like other companies, other communities, you won't be successful if you don't talk to the people.
And that's just to add a little bit more, because I got another question, which was, what are some of the challenges that banks are facing as they introduce these API offerings? And it goes back to a little bit to what you said, Edson. I don't think that they fully realize the importance of developers, the importance of partnerships, the fact that partners and communities and developers of communities of developers will actually ask for feedback and changes. And it's going beyond just a static set of APIs. It's understanding that the world is much more dynamic once you start to build out a community and start to bring in partners to work with you on your platform. So I'm elaborating a little bit more on both the question of startups and partnering with startups, and how does that dovetail into community building. At the end of the day, these are all these are challenges that banks are facing as they move into this new distribution channel.
True. And I'd like to add that many banks, or many people from banks, or some people from banks, believe what are developers isn't something that you hire. Well, developers are something that you engage with, because again, developers are people. If you get this and remember at the first point, developers are people that you need to engage, to nurture, and empower. Then maybe you're doing the right first step.
Great, and this is Tatiana with Bank Innovation, and I think we have another question, and that's, what are some of the challenges that come from an API-heavy innovation strategy?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about the traction of developers and partners. I also know that, we talk about regulation in the sense of PSD2 or the data protection. I know that some banks are concerned about scaling their open banking platform with developers because of security. So what we've seen are banks offering APIs to a select set of partners, and not exposing it to a wide range of partners because they have concerns about backdoors or other security issues where the service may be exploited. So we do see banks actively working with regulators to derive clarity on the level of risk as they open up their APIs to new constituents. So I see that as one challenge. It's not insurmountable. In Singapore and Australia, for example, we see banks be really proactive about that, and regulators being responsive to providing clarification on access. Another is, look, and I think this goes with any technology. It's not a silver bullet. It's not a magic box where you simply turn it on and plug it in, and all of a sudden you make money. It's not a money-making machine. It's a core part of your business, and I think the successful leaders in this space have been the ones that have taken this quite seriously, and really established roles within their organization to be active in community development, in partnership outreach, in business development, marketing to an extent. And like Edson mentioned, marketing with developers is different than regular marketing. And also things like feedback. So making sure that the engineers are being responsive. I think these are all the things that are critically important above and beyond just the mechanism of building and deploying APIs. The last thing I want to add is, banks, when it comes to APIs, have had them for quite some time. APIs aren't new to banks, but they've been typically used for internal consumption. And what that means is being responsive to end users or the end consumers of APIs hasn't been a top priority. And now that they're exposing them to a new constituency, the agility and speed required to be responsive to that community can be a challenge as well. So that's where we think the modernization of the technology platform is important. So you can get that responsiveness that's required as you start to get new consumers of your APIs.
Great, thank you for that. Eric and Edson, thank you for that informative webinar. And to our listeners, I hope you found that useful. Again, we will be posting the recording of this webinar on our website, which again is www.bankinnovation.net. Thank you to our listeners, and thank you, Edson and Eric, again. This is Tatiana Carmen signing off.